When you pull away from someone's life, something powerful happens. The moment your presence is no longer guaranteed, the space you leave behind starts to feel like a void. And here's the thing about human nature. People rarely appreciate what they have until it's no longer there. When you were constantly available, he never had to think twice. He never had to wonder where you were, what you were doing, or how you felt about him. You were there, predictable, dependable, always showing up. But the moment you decide to step back, something shifts. Suddenly, you're not so accessible. Suddenly, your absence is louder than your presence ever was. This is the power of pulling away. It forces a man to confront a reality he never considered before. Life without you. And that's when his mind starts playing tricks on him. He starts remembering the way you made him feel, the moments you laughed together, the way you supported him, the warmth you brought into his life. But now those moments aren't happening anymore. And that realization creates a deep sense of discomfort. He may not show it immediately, but trust me, he feels it. The silence speaks volumes. See, when you're always available, you don't give him the opportunity to miss you. You don't give him the chance to recognize your value. But when you step back, you create contrast. You create space for him to experience life without you. And in that space, something important happens. He starts to reflect. He starts to realize that what he once took for granted is now something he wants back. He starts to wonder if he made a mistake, if he underestimated what you truly meant to him. But, and here's the part that might surprise you, this reaction isn't something he can control. It's psychological. It's human nature. When something is always within reach, we assume it will always be there. But the moment it's gone, our perception changes. What was once familiar suddenly feels rare. And what feels rare, it becomes valuable. That's when he starts thinking about you, obsessing over you, because now he's unsure. Now there's a gap in his life that he never expected. And that uncertainty eats away at him. This is why pulling away isn't about playing games. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about allowing space for someone to truly see your worth instead of constantly proving it. Because when a man starts to feel your absence, that's when he finally starts to understand what he had. There's something about the unknown that keeps a man up at night. When you suddenly pull away, when you stop giving him the same access to your time, your energy, your attention, his mind starts racing. And that's the part most people don't understand. It's not just your presence that makes you powerful. It's the uncertainty you create when you pull back. See, people crave predictability. We like to know what's coming next. We like to feel in control. And when you were always there, always responding, always making an effort, he never had to wonder. But now he has questions. Where did you go? Why did you stop reaching out? Is she moving on? Is she talking to someone else? These thoughts start creeping in, and the more he thinks about them, the more he starts to feel something he didn't expect, discomfort. He was used to the pattern, used to the way things were. He had the security of knowing that no matter what he did, you would still be there. But now, that's no longer guaranteed. And that's when his mind starts to shift. Because here's what happens when you step back. The uncertainty makes him start seeing you differently. When something is predictable, it's easy to overlook. But when something becomes unpredictable, it becomes intriguing. It's like a song you've heard 100 times. It fades into the background, but the moment the lyrics change, you stop and pay attention. That's exactly what happens when you pull away. You disrupt the pattern, and suddenly he's paying attention in a way he never did before. He starts checking his phone more often, waiting for a message that doesn't come. He starts replaying conversations in his head, wondering if he missed a sign. He starts realizing that the version of you he was so used to, that version is gone. And the more he realizes that, the more he starts to chase the certainty he once had. That's why people say distance makes the heart grow fonder. It's not just a cliche, it's psychological. When something is no longer within reach, we instinctively wanted more. This is why stepping back is so powerful. It's not about playing hard to get, it's about shifting the dynamic. When you pull away, you're not just creating space, you're creating intrigue. You're making him realize that you are not a given, you are a choice. And the moment he starts to see you as a choice, that's when he starts to appreciate your value in a way he never did before. The moment he realizes you're no longer there the way you used to be, something shifts inside him. See, when you were always available, always the first to text, always the one making plans, he got comfortable. And comfort can be dangerous in relationships because it breeds complacency. He didn't have to work to keep you because he knew you were already there. But now there's an absence. An absence does something powerful. It creates space for desire to grow. Think about it. When someone is always around, their presence is expected. But the second they pull away, that presence turns into a memory. And memories have a way of intensifying feelings. He starts remembering the way you laughed at his jokes, the way you supported him, the way you made him feel like the most important person in the room. And those memories, they don't just fade, they become sharper. Because now he doesn't have new moments with you to replace them. And here's the kicker. When he starts missing you, it's not just about missing your presence. It's about missing the way he felt when he was around you. People don't just miss other people. They miss the version of themselves they got to be with that person. And if you made him feel confident, strong, admired, desired, he's going to crave that feeling again. But now, that feeling is no longer at his fingertips. This is when the real shift happens. He starts wondering if he took you for granted. He starts questioning if he made a mistake. And the more he questions, the more he realizes that the absence of you is louder than the presence of anyone else. See, he might have thought he was okay without you at first. He might have told himself he needed space or that he was fine moving on. But the mind plays tricks when someone becomes a mystery. The what ifs creep in. What if he's talking to someone else? What if she's happier without me? What if I lost something I didn't even realize I needed? And that's the beauty of pulling away. You give him the opportunity to see your value in a way he never did before. You become the unanswered question in his mind. And unanswered questions, they demand to be solved. When you pull away, something powerful happens. You shift the dynamic. You were once predictable, always there, always available, always the one who cared just a little bit more. And he got used to that. But now the energy has changed. He's starting to feel what life is like without your constant presence. And that absence is unsettling. It disrupts the pattern, the rhythm he took for granted. See, the human mind craves what it can't fully grasp. When something is too accessible, it's easy to overlook. But the moment it becomes scarce, it suddenly gains value. Think about it. When a song you love is played on the radio all the time, it fades into the background. But when it's taken away, when you hear it unexpectedly after a long time, it hits differently. It makes you remember why you loved it in the first place. That's exactly what happens when you pull away. At first, he might not react. He might even act like he doesn't care, but that's just the ego talking. The truth is, he notices. He notices when you don't text first. He notices when you don't check in. He notices when you're not as excited to hear from him. And that noticing, it plants a seed, a small, almost unnoticeable shift in his mind. But over time, that seed grows into curiosity. Why aren't you reaching out? Why don't you seem affected? Have you moved on? The moment a man starts asking himself those questions, he's in trouble, because now he's not just thinking about you, he's analyzing the situation. He's wondering if he made a mistake, if he miscalculated. And this is where the power of uncertainty comes in. If he was sure about you before, now he's not. And nothing is more uncomfortable than uncertainty. See, most people assume that a man realizes what he's lost after you've completely moved on. But that's not true. He realizes it the moment he senses the shift, the moment he feels like he's no longer in control of the situation. And when a man feels like he's losing something valuable, that's when his instincts kick in. That's when he starts trying to figure out how to get it back. And that's the beauty of pulling away. It's not about games. It's about breaking a cycle. It's about making him wake up to what he had before it's too late. Because once he realizes your presence wasn't a given, but a privilege, that's when everything changes. When you pull away, you're not just creating distance, you're shifting the emotional balance. Before, he knew you were there. He felt your energy, your attention, your availability. And because of that, he never had to question what he meant to you. But now, things feel different. He senses a void where your presence used to be. And that space is uncomfortable. Men don't always process emotions the way women do. At first, he might tell himself that nothing has changed. He might even enjoy the newfound space, thinking he has the upper hand. But slowly, something shifts. He starts checking his phone more often. He wonders why you haven't texted. He notices the quiet, the absence of your voice, your affection, your energy. It starts to creep in. And that absence, it creates longing. See, most people think desire is built through closeness, but that's only half the truth. Desire is also fueled by space. When something feels slightly out of reach, we crave it more. Think about it. When a person is always around, their presence becomes normal. But when they step back, when they become a little harder to reach, their value skyrockets. The mind starts obsessing over what it no longer has easy access to. Now he's wondering, are you talking to someone else? Are you moving on? Have you realized your worth and decided he's not enough? The moment those questions enter his mind, he's in deep. Because now he's not just thinking about you casually, he's fixated. And that fixation is powerful. It makes him chase. It makes him want to prove himself, to win back the attention he once took for granted. But here's where most women go wrong. They break the silence too soon. They get impatient. They want to know if he's thinking about him, so they reach out first. And the moment they do, all that emotional buildup disappears. The spell is broken. That's why patience is key. Let him sit in the discomfort of your absence. Let him feel what it's like to miss you. Because only then will he realize how much he truly values you. When you pull away, something shifts in his mind. Suddenly he starts reflecting on your worth. See, men don't always realize what they have when it's right in front of them. Comfort creates blindness. When he knows you're always there, always available, He doesn't have to think about losing you. He doesn't have to question what his life would look like without you. But the moment you step back, that certainty crumbles. And in its place, doubt. Now he starts playing back memories in his head. The way you laughed at his jokes, the way you supported him when no one else did, the way your presence made his life better, even in ways he never fully acknowledged before. He starts realizing that your energy was something special, something rare. And with that realization comes a new kind of fear. What if he let something valuable slip away? See, men process emotions differently. They don't always recognize feelings in the moment. But when distance is introduced, when there's space to think, emotions have a way of catching up. And this is where he starts to compare. He looks around at other people in his life, maybe even tries distracting himself. But nothing feels quite the same because what you brought to the table wasn't ordinary, it was unique. And that uniqueness, it's irreplaceable. The best part, this realization isn't forced. You didn't have to convince him of your worth. You didn't have to beg for his attention or prove anything. Your absence did the work for you. And that's the most powerful position to be in. Because when a man comes back after truly understanding your value, he doesn't just return, he returns with clarity, with a renewed sense of appreciation, but only if you let him feel that absence long enough to miss what he once had. When you pulled away, you triggered something deep in his mind, something he didn't even realize was there. You see, people, especially men, are wired to chase what feels uncertain, to desire what they can't fully have. And the moment you stepped back, you became a mystery again. Suddenly, he doesn't know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, or what you're doing. And that uncertainty, it's driving him crazy. At first, he might try to act like he doesn't care. He might tell himself he's fine, that he's in control. But the truth is, his mind keeps circling back to you because before he had access. He knew your rhythm, your responses, your availability. But now he has questions. And those questions create an obsession. Why did she change? Is she seeing someone else? Did I take her for granted? The more he wonders, the more invested he becomes. Because that's how human psychology works. Scarcity creates value. When something feels abundant, we take it for granted. But the moment it becomes rare, that's when we start to truly appreciate it. And that's exactly what's happening in his mind right now. Now, here's where it gets interesting. He might try to test you. He might send a random text just to see how you react. Not because he's ready to commit, but because he wants to know if he still has a hold on you. If you respond right away, if you show that he still has control, his curiosity fades. But if you remain distant, if you hold your ground, that curiosity only grows stronger. And suddenly he's the one feeling unsure. He's the one craving validation. This is the shift you want. Because now he's not just thinking about you, he's feeling your absence in a way he never expected. And when a man starts to miss you like that, when he starts to feel that pull, that's when you know the dynamic has changed. That's when you hold the power. When you pulled away, something shifted. Not just in the dynamic, but in his perception of you. He expected you to react a certain way, to keep reaching out, to keep giving him the same energy. But instead, you became distant, unavailable, unpredictable. And that shift, it planted a seed of doubt in his mind. Because for the first time, he's questioning whether he ever really had you the way he thought he did. See, people don't truly appreciate something until they feel the possibility of losing it. And when a man starts to sense that you're no longer where he left you, his mind doesn't just acknowledge it, it fixates on it. It starts creating scenarios. Did she meet someone else? Is she over me? Was I wrong about her? That doubt begins to unravel the sense of security he once had. Now, what happens next is crucial. His ego might push him to act like he doesn't care, to post things that make it seem like he's unbothered, to pretend he's moving on faster than you. But inside, that uncertainty is eating away at him because deep down, he knows something is different. And no matter how hard he tries to mask it, he feels the weight of your absence. That's the power of emotional detachment. When you step back, you give him the space to feel exactly what it's like without you. No reminders, no check-ins, no lingering energy that keeps him comfortable. And in that space, he starts realizing the difference between having your attention and actually having you. And trust me, those are two very different things. Because when you want to meet this person, it's very easy to move into getting connected. When a man feels that shift, when he realizes that your presence in his life was never guaranteed, he starts to move differently. He stops taking you for granted. He stops assuming you'll always be there. And more than that, he starts craving the certainty he once had. Because now you're not just someone he knew, you're the one who got away. When you create that distance, the man you pulled away from begins to see things from a different perspective. At first, he might be confused, maybe even irritated. He may wonder why you're not responding, why you're not playing by the old rules, why things aren't the way they used to be. This initial discomfort, this feeling of being unsettled, is actually a powerful tool. It disrupts his routine, his sense of control, and forces him to confront his emotions. He pays. When you wake up in the morning, you do that thing. It's in that discomfort where the real magic happens. See, when we get comfortable, we often stop valuing what's around us. We think we know everything about the person we're with, their reactions, how they'll respond. We start taking them for granted, assuming that they'll always be there, always available. But when you pull back, you disrupt that. You shake up his certainty. You challenge his assumptions about the relationship. He starts questioning if what he had was real or if he's losing you for good. You see, the mind doesn't just process what's in front of it. It's constantly running scenarios. What's missing? What could be? What might happen next? So when you stop playing into the usual dynamic, his mind goes into overdrive, creating all sorts of possibilities, most of them unsettling. He can't help but wonder if he's losing something important. He wonders if the bond you shared is slipping away, if you're not as emotionally available as you once were, or even worse, if someone else is now taking the place he once had in your life. The uncertainty that comes with distance forces him to feel that something is slipping out of his hands, even if he doesn't admit it to himself right away. This is the part where his mind starts to shift. He becomes more attuned to you, more aware of your energy, your presence, and your absence. He's constantly analyzing your every move, your silence, your actions. It's almost like he's trying to decode the mystery of who you are now and why he feels this nagging pull to reconnect. Now, this doesn't mean that you should start playing mind games or trying to control his actions. That's not the goal here. The purpose of pulling away is not to manipulate, but to create the space necessary for him to confront his own emotions and for him to value you in a way he didn't before. By pulling back, you're giving him the opportunity to reflect on the relationship, on his own feelings, and on how much you truly mean to him. It's about creating that emotional gap where he realizes, without a doubt, what life feels like without you. You see, the human mind is designed to crave what it cannot have. When you're there, constantly available, constantly giving, there's a sense of security. But when you pull back, you're no longer predictable, no longer someone he can count on being there whenever he needs. And that unpredictability, that challenge, is what begins to drive him to think about you constantly. Because now it's not just about him being with you when it's convenient. Now it's about him realizing that in his pursuit of comfort and certainty, he may have overlooked something important. He starts remembering the moments, the words, the connection, and how special it was when things were truly aligned. He's reminded of what he took for granted and the deeper emotional bond he once shared with you. This process isn't immediate. It takes time. And it's in the space you create, in the absence you leave, that he starts to connect the dots. He begins to feel something he might not have acknowledged before, the depth of your presence in his life. And that realization, it's powerful. It makes him want to make things right, to bridge that gap, to reclaim something he thought was just a given, but is now slipping away. So, this is where you see the shift in his behavior. The calls, the texts, the attention, it all increases. Suddenly, he's making more of an effort. Why? Because your absence created a void that he can't ignore. And in that void, he starts to feel the weight of the emotional space you once filled. He begins to see you not just as someone he could casually connect with, but as someone he needs to work for, someone worth pursuing, someone whose presence he craves. The distance you've created doesn't just force him to think, it forces him to feel. In the end, this emotional shift isn't about playing games or trying to manipulate anyone. It's about recognizing that sometimes creating space in a relationship is necessary for the other person to truly see your worth. When you pull back, it isn't an act of cruelty or indifference. It's an act of self-respect, a moment where you step back and allow the other person to truly appreciate you, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. And when they start to feel that emotional void, when they begin to miss what they once had, that's when they'll realize the truth. They were never fully aware of how much they depended on you, how much they needed you, until you were no longer there in the same way. The absence becomes the space for their understanding to grow. And in that space, they'll start to feel the pull to come back and make things right. When you pull away, it's not just about physical distance or emotional detachment. It's about shifting the dynamic of the relationship in a way that makes the other person reevaluate their assumptions about you and about the connection you once had. When we're constantly available, constantly giving, we often don't allow the other person the space to fully appreciate us for who we are. We become a fixture, something predictable, something they can rely on without fully realizing what they have. But when you create that distance, when you take a step back, something powerful begins to happen. The person who once took you for granted, the one who might have overlooked your worth, suddenly begins to realize just how much they miss you. It's in that moment of realization, when they notice your absence, that the emotional impact begins to set in. They start to feel the gap you've created, and that feeling is often an uncomfortable one. When we're used to someone being around, texting, calling, being there when we need them, we start to rely on their presence, often without even thinking about it. But when that presence is no longer available, it triggers something deep within us. We begin to recognize that we have grown accustomed to having that person in our life. And without them, there's a void, a sense of loss that starts to weigh on us. This void, this feeling of something missing, is what triggers the shift in thinking. The emotional space you've created forces them to acknowledge that you were never just a person in the background. You were never just a convenience or someone who could be taken for granted. No, your absence brings to the forefront the reality that you were an integral part of their life, someone they valued, whether they realized it at the time or not. What happens next is crucial. They start to question their own feelings. They start to wonder what went wrong, why things aren't the same. They wonder why you aren't responding the way you used to, why you're no longer chasing them, why the energy you once gave so freely is now something that feels distant, almost out of reach. This confusion isn't just an intellectual one, it's an emotional one. It forces them to confront their own emotions, feelings they may have pushed aside or ignored. Now they have to grapple with the idea that maybe they haven't been giving you the attention, the care, or the effort that you deserve. As this realization sets in, they begin to see the relationship in a new light. They see what they had, and suddenly it's no longer just about convenience. They're forced to dig deeper, to think about what your presence truly meant to them. And this is when the wheels of change start to turn. They begin to feel that pull towards you again. They start remembering the good times, the laughter, the moments of connection, the feelings of warmth and security that they felt when you were around. They start to miss that connection, something they might not have even appreciated when it was readily available. But what's important here is not just that they begin to miss you. It's that this missing of you isn't just a longing for your presence. It's a realization of their own emotional dependence on you, something they may not have fully understood or acknowledged before. It's not just about wanting you back because they're bored or lonely. It's about them recognizing that you were and still are a crucial part of their emotional world. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When someone realizes that they miss you, when they recognize that they've grown emotionally attached to you, it triggers a sense of urgency. They start thinking, what do I need to do to get back to the way things were? How can I make things right? How can I get back the person I once took for granted? This is when the effort begins. This is when the pursuit starts. They begin to take action in ways they never did before. The phone calls increase, the messages become more frequent, and suddenly they're making more of an effort to connect with you. Why? Because they've come to understand that the absence of your presence isn't just something they can easily brush off. It's a feeling that begins to linger, to haunt them, and they realize they don't want to live without it anymore. What you've done by pulling away is create a space for them to truly see you, not just as someone they can take for granted, but as someone whose presence adds value to their life. Your absence forces them to confront their own emotional attachment to you, something they may not have realized was there before. They start to miss your conversations, your insights, your companionship. They begin to wonder if they've lost something precious, something they won't be able to get back unless they make a real effort to reconnect. This emotional realization is what drives them to want you back, not because they can't stand being without you, but because they now see the importance of what they had with you. This is the turning point, the moment when the dynamic changes and they begin to pursue you with a new sense of urgency. It's no longer about convenience. It's about value, recognition, and the understanding that the connection you once shared is something that can't be easily replaced. And in this moment, when they begin to chase you, When they realize what they've lost, you hold the power. You hold the power to choose whether to allow them back into your life, whether to give them the space to make amends, or whether to continue on your own path. The ball is now in your court, and it's up to you to decide how you want to move forward. But one thing is clear: your absence has done something powerful. It has made them realize just how much they need you, how much they miss you, and how valuable your presence truly is.